think the most important thing to do on day one is at least build out your plan.
All right, welcome back to the 7-Stage LSAT podcast. Joined by Alex, joined by Bailey and Nicole. Nice to see you both.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Nicole, you were in Japan for a while.
Yeah,
How was that?
I took an extended podcast hiatus for a few weeks. I was in Japan. It was beautiful. Would recommend to anybody listening, if you want to take a nice recovery from LSAT studying with a trip, that might be a fantastic destination.
And Bailey, you were in South America, but you traveled with your mic, so we heard from you.
True, that is true.
Yeah, you had your mic.
Wow, making me look bad. Like I could have done that too, I guess. But
no, you were being good.
Not
you
about
took time
that.
off work. I don't take time off work. I'm silly. I should.
It's not
rest
about
days
that.
are important, Bailey, for studying.
They are. They're so important for stamina.
Yeah,
very true.
Totally. And me, I've just been here. But I don't know. That sounded sadder than it was. I traveled in
things
the fall.
about being here.
I was in Europe. Yeah. Being here, wherever here may be. But this isn't about us. It's about you. Also, at the end of you, dear listener, at the end of the episode, I recorded a segment with JY. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. Some wisdom. If you don't get wisdom from us, stick around. So we thought we'd do an episode today for those of you who are planning to take the test in late summer, early fall, which is, I think, statistically the most popular times to take this test. So I think a lot of people are probably starting their LSAT journey around this time. So let's lay it out. First off, what do you think, Bailey, Nicole? Is now a good time to start? Is that a feasible roadmap from April? We're recording this on April 1st. It'll come out a week later from here to a late summer test. Does that seem good?
I think it's totally reasonable, right? You have like a 4 or 5 month window. It's a nice time in the cycle to take the exam. You have a cushion, right? If you decide maybe to go for a second or third, you still have that time in the fall. So I think from now to August, September time is a really reasonable time frame.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, the only time frame that I would be cautious about is if you're starting right now and you're trying to take the June exam. I think that's a little bit too fast if you're trying to improve more than 5 points. But beyond that, yeah, perfect timeline. I think this nice, we always recommend 3 to 6 months when we're talking about this in study plan workshop or talking about just how long it takes to study for the test in study plan workshop, which quick plug, live class, everybody should come to. It's free multiple times a week. You can get some more specific feedback on your own study plans if you come to that class. But yeah, today we just wanted to give kind of an overview. I think a lot of people have been coming in with about this starting point, wanting to end up taking the August, September, October exams, and it's totally doable. How do we start? What do you think?
Yeah. Where do we go? Nicole, what's step one?
Well, I suppose if today is day one, when you're listening to this, you want to identify your goals, right? The best way to start is taking the diagnostic, seeing where you're at, deciding what your goal is going to be, depending on, what schools you plan to apply to and where their medians are. And from there, building out your timeline. I think the most important thing to do on day one is at least build out your plan. You don't want to just go in blind, just randomly open a page and just start there. You want to at least have some kind of framework that you're going to follow, whether that be, I'm going to start by taking my diagnostic today, or I'm going to start by scanning through 7-Sage and understanding what my modules are to get through, whether that be, deciding here is my target and I have X amount of points left. You just want to lay out your plan on day one.
Nice. Agreed. Are you of the mind that there is some sort of ceiling for improvement on this test? Should somebody make their goal score based on what their first diagnostic test score is?
I wouldn't say that there's a ceiling necessarily, right? The sky's the limit. And I feel like it's a common misconception that you can only improve by so much from your diagnostic. It's totally possible to get to a 180 theoretically from anywhere. It just depends on how much time you plan to commit studying, how many weeks you have to study, where your weaknesses lie, and making sure you have a really good plan to target those weaknesses. But no, I don't think there's any ceiling. But Agreed. At the same time, I guess you want to be realistic, in your target. I don't want to just say okay, my goal's at 180. Here we go. Let's just dive in, right? I do kind of want to think about, well, my medians for my schools maybe are 167. So I want to target something there, or maybe in the low 170s. So I at least want to have a target. And if you go past that target, then, all power to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like something actionable. I think if you have a particularly high diagnostic, then that tells you like maybe you can do this on the quicker end. That is still going to be like 3 months. It's not like pretty hard to do it faster than that. Um, so that's good. But if you have a low diagnostic, that doesn't indicate your ceiling. I think the only thing the diagnostic tells you is if you have a high score or a score that is close to your goal, then you know it's reasonable to expect that you might be able to do it on the shorter end of things. But other than that, I mean, and maybe this sounds like I don't think it rules anything out whatsoever. It's the first time you're taking this test. It's just kind of like doing a cold plunge into the world of the LSAT. It's getting you acquainted. Yeah, sure.
Good
You like that?
analogy. Love
That's
it.
really fun. Yeah. Can you build that out more? Have you done a cold plunge?
Have I done a
What
cold
does it
plunge?
feel
I've
like?
never done a true cold plunge. I've just taken like a sort of a cold. You approximate it in the shower.
Right.
Other than that, I guess
Kinda
like
shocking.
cold bodies of water I've been in. So yeah, but yeah, it's. I think we all can imagine what it's like if we've done it or not. It's just diving into the deep end, to use another metaphor. But it doesn't indicate your ceiling. Is what I would say.
Agreed. Yeah.
Totally agreed.
Amazing.
And once we've
So,
decided our target, right, where do we go from there, Bailey? What do you think is the next step?
next step after deciding your target, I mean, yeah, if you haven't literally taken the diagnostic test yet, I would just rip off the band-aid and take it. If you're super nervous about taking the diagnostic before you go through any parts of the curriculum, some people like to do a little bit of the foundation section, for example, in the 7-stage curriculum or 7-stage syllabus before they take that diagnostic test. But like, just take it. And then your very first step, I guess, over that first few week period would be to get through that foundations, get through that diagnostic test, start getting a little bit more of that overview of what your timeline is going to look like, which again, higher diagnostic, maybe 3-ish months. You want to see more improvement, maybe up to 6 months, and kind of think through where that would put you. I wouldn't tell you to sign up for a test right away. You can't sign up for the August or onwards test right now, but you can start thinking about when you might want to be checking in on your practice test scores to see, oh, am I ready to actually sign up for that test? Because,
Yeah, I think it's like.
side note, or what were we going to say?
No, go ahead, finish.
I was just going to give a quick side note as to when are you ready to take the test. I think we've said it before on the podcast, but I always like to share this. Most recent 5 practice tests are at or above your goal score or score you're walking away from the test, happy to apply to law school with. If you're not quite there yet and you are looking for some sort of score outcome on the test, chances are it's not just going to magically happen on test day. You want to keep practicing until you consistently can replicate that score on practice tests.
Yeah,
Agreed.
It could be a good time to just chart out, get all of your dates, all of your important dates on a calendar. The registration dates for the tests that you might want to take. If you are if you are planning on applying for accommodations, you want to get that on your calendar ASAP as well, because that is just that's make or break. You can't apply. All of these are. You can't register for a test after the date. You can't register for accommodations after the date. So put these on your calendar. Go to a study plan workshop. As we said, these are free. Nicole and Bailey teach them. So whether you're a live subscriber at 7 Stage
Whether
or
you're
not,
alive.
whether you're alive, no,
Whether you're alive or
alive.
not, just come, please.
Alive
Have
or
so much
dead,
fun.
You're welcome. Yeah, they are haunted. Many often
Exactly.
these are haunted.
It's been terrifying this
Um,
last week.
Yeah. Honestly, if you're a ghost, come to any of them. That's
Please.
fine. You don't have to pay.
In fact, I would love it. And tell me about your past life tea.
Yeah,
I want to know what happened.
Climb through my
But-
screen.
If you're alive, and regardless of whether or not you're a live subscriber, you are able to take the study plan workshop. We have we have somewhere in the range of like 4 to 6 per week. So there's a ton to choose from, and you're going to get at a variety of different times, and you're going to get direct feedback on your study plan. So start there. Start with your diagnostic. We don't need us to give you permission to do that.
Yeah,
That's the
first thing that
we're
I'm going to
gonna
tell you
recommend.
there is do the diagnostic. So having already done that, awesome, cool, it works.
But we have these
Sure.
almost every day of the week, so you could come to the day that you're listening to this. Chances are there's a study plan workshop that is available. So avail yourself of that. Whether or not you're a subscriber or not, it is available to you.
Amazing.
Yeah. What's next?
We were talking about
So-
charting dates on the calendar. Actually, one more thing I was going to point out is keep in mind the score release dates too. I feel like some people lose track of the fact that once you take the exam, right, you're not getting your score immediately. You're going to have to be waiting a several week period, especially if you plan to retake and you have a window like the August and September exam. Keep in mind that almost immediately after score release, you're going to have to be jumping right into the next one. So make sure you don't lose your momentum in that month in between, right? These are all things to keep track of too as you're planning.
Right. And just to be clear, all those tests in the fall, like the August, September, October, November, they're all back to back. You cannot get your score back from August and then sign up for September. There's just no way. The sign up dates are usually about a month and a half out. So if you want to be able to take August and September, you're going to have signed up for both of them in advance of the August exam, even.
It is what it is. I think there's a lesson there. Like so many of these things, like there's a lot of, this process can be, it's difficult. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. Focus on the things that are in your control, and that I would apply that to like the things around the LSAT and then the LSAT itself. A lot of times we talk about how it can be very tempting to view this test as unfair. And the sooner that you can just accept that it's playing by its own rules, the better off you'll be. And I think that applies to everything around it as well. Look, the applications there's a lot to wade through. The dates, the dates of things, the cost of things, it's of registering for things, of application fees. It's all a lot. And for your own sanity, I would say focus on the things that are in your control. But you know what? I'd recommend that in general. I don't know. Call me crazy.
Whoa. I don't know if I can
Alex
get on
is
board
always
with that
dropping
one.
spiritual nuggets. Always dropping the spiritual info.
Always trying to make it
Outside of the LSAT, outside of law school, it is important to focus on things that you can't control. Is that what we're going with?
Right. Exactly. No, that's so true. Okay, so big picture, you've logged your dates, you've gotten through the foundations on the 7-stage core curriculum, you've also gotten through your diagnostic test. It's time to just start chugging through. Or
I can interject there. Actually, that made me think of an idea. Is a common question as you're working through the foundations, right? A common question I get from students is, okay, the foundations is super dense. You're learning tons of info at once, all of these vocabulary terms that you don't know where they apply yet, right? Like things like conditional indicator words, the argument forms. When you're doing it, you might be like, okay, where is this taking me? Why do I care? What are some of the important takeaways students should get from the foundations at, like face value? If you're not trying to take notes on every single word of every single page, at least what are the most important things we need to take away? What do we think?
That's a good question. I think overview, like we got to understand the relationship. So I feel like there's 3 kind of like overall boxes of relationships that I put in the foundations. It's like relationship between premise and conclusion, just structure of support within a stimulus, relationship between sufficiency and necessity, just conditional reasoning, and then causation relationship. Like you could talk about that as the relationship between correlation and causation, or just A and B when we're making a causal argument between the two. But I think that just kind of viewing it as more of an overview of like, hey, we're just introducing these things that are related to each other. Think about it as a couple like overall categories. And as long as you can walk away from the core curriculum, being able to articulate what's a premise, what's a conclusion, what do they have to do with each other? Why might an argument not be a good one? And then we can talk about what's sufficiency, what's necessity, what do those have to do with each other? Maybe make sure that you've understood those group 1 through 4 indicators. A lot of people like to make flashcards for those, for example, but you don't have to. And then the whole causal logic part of the core curriculum or the foundations as well, just start taking away those relationships. What does it mean if something actually causes the other thing? Or what does it mean if those two things are correlated? Yeah.
Agreed. I feel like if I got to walk away with some physical notes from the foundation, it's like a flashcard of your indicator words, I think the lesson on argument forms is pretty helpful. Like the 7, I think it's 7, right? Or something like that. It's between 7 and 9 classic argument forms.
Remember the exact number.
And the invalid argument forms, like these important flashcards or like note sheets, I feel like are the most important deliverable items. And then just conceptually understanding the relationships that Bailey phrased really nicely.
It's important to have your deliverables. You got to get that deliverable list for each chunk
I've
of it.
never
I actually
thought
really
of
like
that word in terms of the
That's
LSAT.
such a corporate
No, it's
phrase.
good.
It is.
That was such a corporate coded word.
I know, but I actually really like it. I think it's helpful because people are going through the foundations being like, you're just at the beginning. You're like, you're trying to understand basically kind of like ranking things by order of like, you're trying to, it's so much information. So you're trying to figure out like what do I prioritize? What do I like write down? Where do I put my focus? So I think having deliverables is really nice. It's all serves a purpose. It's all useful. But I think that Nicole highlighted some key parts that you can sort of commit to memory, or at least to notes as you go.
I mean, I
What's
think
next?
you could come up with deliverables for any portion of your studying. Like when
You
you go through
should.
the curriculum after the
Kind of useful.
foundations, yeah, your deliverable could be like, okay, at the end of this week, I want to be able to do a set of 5 most strongly supported questions and only get 1 wrong or something. That's my deliverable for the beginning of this week. So I don't know. I like to think of every week like I have a checklist and I'm like, this is what I hope I accomplish this week. Like bigger picture, like I hope I finish this part of the curriculum, but also like I hope I can do this drill in this amount of time or something. Keeps you guided as you go.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So yeah, now you're getting just into the rest of the curriculum, which exactly that's your next step. It's just going to be chugging through that logical reasoning and the RC sections of the curriculum. Now you can go through it in order. You can go like just question type by question type as it goes through the LR. It's going to introduce you all the LR first, and then you'll jump into the RC section. I personally recommend doing a little bit of LR and a little bit of RC kind of hand in hand. I don't know what your guys' stance on that is, but if you want to do it like 2 LR hours a day, 1 RC hour a day, I think that's something that works for some people. Also, some people don't like to be that kind of mentally divided even within a day. So maybe you just do 1 RC day a week while you're chugging through that LR curriculum. Otherwise, I do recommend to do a little bit of RC at least while you're still going through the LR, because I think a lot of people just neglect it until the end. And then they're like, oh, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I thought I could read. Turns out I am being gaslit into feeling like I can't read. And it's just, you got to train yourself. You got to practice. So earlier that you start RC, the better, I would say.
Yeah, I think
Thoughts?
either way. Yeah, I think totally. I think I jumped around, but also logic games were on the test, so
Yeah,
I kind
change
of wanted
things.
to. I wanted to get into logic games, but I do think I think variety can be helpful for some people, and I'd take it a step further, which is that we've really been focusing on the LSAT. Like people, you'll hear a lot like do the LSAT before your applications, and while I do think it is the priority, I actually found it kind of useful to like work on some application stuff at the same time, just as a way of like putting like I think what is important is that the LSAT is more important. Until you've gotten a score that you like, your LSAT score is more important than the rest of your applications, which can wait and are not really quantifiable in the same way. But for me, it was helpful to vary what I was doing, to like have some okay, I'm gonna do an hour of LSAT and then like I'm gonna work on my resume. It's just a very different task, so it actually kind of helped me mentally. I don't know what you guys think about that.
No, I agree.
No, I
I mean,
agree.
I wasn't that productive, I will say, but what helped me was varying my tasks mentally in terms of like do an hour of the LSAT and then go for a walk for half an hour and then come back, get some good food in you and make sure that you can keep going. So, yeah, whatever that looks like for you. I wish I could go back and tell my past self to also be more productive, maybe do a little bit of that, but teach their own. Like whatever works for you guys. I think there's so much to be said about actually like varying what you're doing day to day so that you can speed up the process big picture. That probably feels weird, like that feels counterproductive or counterintuitive, but it's true. I mean, part of making sure that you are increasing your score on the LSAT is making sure that you're not burning out, like just forcing yourself to do more and more LSAT hours every day. So I don't know.
And yeah, and so your day of studying when you're doing the curriculum doesn't have to look like just like 4 hours of sitting at your desk just watching videos back to back to
I
back,
can't
right?
do that.
You can spice things up and create variability, right? Like you could practice doing fun drills, right? Like some of the drills that we have in the drill bank and the study plan workshop, things like confidence drills, start, stop, things that may feel a little bit more like a game that you get to entertain yourself a little in the middle of a difficult study day. Things like just reading passages to practice familiarizing yourself with the vocab, maybe doing speed drills, reviewing things you've learned before. So you're not just like sitting at the desk chugging away at, a bunch of videos for hours and hours every single day, right? Introduce some variability.
I have another really fun way to add variability to your practice. Anybody want to guess what it is?
I don't know. I'm not creative enough to guess today.
It's like such a gimme. It's just come to live classes.
Live
Come hang out with us.
Duh.
Come on.
Duh.
It's just
Definitely
okay. Yeah,
variability.
not to I'll finish the plug. I think it's worth it.
Or
I think
listen
it's a
to the
really helpful
podcast.
way. What?
I said, or listen to the podcast to
Oh,
drive in
or
your
listen to the
car,
podcast, right? I
go
mean,
on a
there's so much
walk and
more
listen.
things that you can consume. Yes, yeah. But no, live class is especially a great way to just interact with other people. Like you get in your bubble of studying for the LSAT all day, every day. You're kind of feeling like you're the only person who's experiencing these excruciating mental pains. Trust me, other people are going through it. You're going to get in a class with them. First of all, we're going to make it less mentally painful because we make them fun. And then also, you're going to be able to, struggle through it with other people and to actually be able to pick other people's brains. Just so helpful in so many ways.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, however you want to do it, we also have study groups now that you can. They're free. So
True.
they're on the live class schedule, but they're free for anyone to attend, and it's just like a way of meeting other people, working on things together. So I would definitely recommend that. Live class, I think, is great and definitely the best option out there. But there's other ways of creating that community and that variability that you can try out and seek out for yourself. But I definitely agree live class is worth it. And we have free classes to try. So check those out as well.
And importantly,
what's-
I feel like live classes are catered to all the different parts of your study journey. So it doesn't have to be when you're already done with the curriculum, right? We have foundational classes that help guide you. Or it could be when you're already done and now you're in like the drilling PT phase and you want to work on improving timing or like higher level comprehension and stuff. So it could really be anywhere in your study journey if you want to spice up your study schedule.
Exactly.
Yeah, so once you're through the core curriculum, what do things look like now, Bailey?
Then it's a lot of weekly practice tests, setting goals based on your own strengths and weaknesses from that practice test. You can use the 7 Sage Analytics page to figure out which question stems or which passage styles you want to spend your time on. I choose my highest priority question types and passage styles from that. I then go back to my study plan, which, by the way, will give you a little template for this if you come to that study plan workshop. But I'll go back to my study plan. I'll make my goals for the week. I'm just trying to get like a point or two extra in each section by focusing on my highest priority question types. And then I'm going to go through and try to pepper throughout my week a handful of full-time sections or untimed sections, depending on where you're at in your studying. I try to do more on-time stuff when you're easing out of the curriculum, more timed sections and time drills as you're getting closer and closer to your test day, kind of like a sliding scale. So full sections throughout the week, some targeted drills each day. I say 2 to 3, and like try to pepper in some of those fun drills that Nicole's talking about. Again, come to study plan workshop. We got a drill bank that we'll give you guys, confidence drills, stop to start drills, lots of them that you can start adding into your practice, even like right away out of the core curriculum to start developing the right way to get to the right answers. And then beyond that, I like to make sure that I'm consistently catching up on my wrong answer journal every week, spending a little bit of time every day, keeping up with questions that I've been missing, making sure that I'm thoroughly getting some insight into not only why did I miss it, or not only why is it wrong, but also why did I miss it? Like, how did I convince myself that the wrong answer was right? How did I convince myself that the right answer was wrong? What's my action item takeaway? And then some live classes, another PT at the end of the week, rinse and repeat, keep catering those goals towards your strengths and weaknesses.
Something you could try too is for depending how confident you feel leaving the curriculum, if you're intimidated to jump straight into PT phase, like let's say it still feels a little scary to just go straight for like a 2.5 hour whatever PT, you can spend some time working up your stamina. So things like how Bailey mentioned, just doing full sections. So not the full exam, but just one LR section, right? So you practice increasing stamina, or you can even take it a step before, right? Practice just extending how many questions you can do in a row. So practice a set of 12 questions straight, mixed together, a set of 15, maybe a set of 20, slowly increment until you feel comfortable tackling the whole, like 26, 27 question set. It doesn't have to be like a deep dive straight into the full sections. Same with RC, right? If you don't feel comfortable yet diving straight into a full 4-passage section, maybe work your way up. Practice doing sets of 2 passages together timed until you perfect it and get to like a target of however many you want to miss, depending on your target score. Then maybe go up to 3 passages, do sets of 3 passages timed until you feel really comfortable. Then add to the 4th. So it just depends how comfortable you feel, but don't feel like as soon as you're done with the curriculum, you have to just like take a PT and whatever you get is kind of like your ceiling. No, right? There's a lot of ways that you can ease into your stamina and work on your timing before doing an entire PT front to end, front to back, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is, I would say, like we have a lot of resources on this podcast for different drills that you can build. Like there's some ideas of what to do, and go through the back catalog here. We have like a lot of episodes where we just offer different things that will be useful at different times in your studying, but particularly in the drill phase. I think that's like a lot of the when we talk about drills, that's what we're talking about. So there's check that out. What else? Anything else to add? I feel like we did a pretty good job of laying it out.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm thinking right away about like that podcast that we did a while ago about how to break out of a score plateau, because I think what happens probably after you spend some time in that self-study phase, you might get to a place where you're feeling like you keep getting the same score over and over. You can't quite get out of like the 150s, the 160s, or whatever it is. And so definitely listen to that podcast. But a lot of the takeaways that we had there were just kind of meeting yourself where you're at. Like, I think that people come to classes and they're like, how do I get out of the 160s? And I'm like, well, I can tell you some big, broad strokes things that I notice as patterns between students in the 160s versus 170s. But it's also a lot more about getting more familiar with your analytics and figuring out where am I spending the most time in a full set or sorry, in a full test. Where am I missing the most questions? Are there trends with question types that I'm a little bit weaker on? And so again, it's just like all about making sure that you can cater those study plans week after week and try new things if whatever you've been doing isn't working. Like that's so much of this test is about creative problem solving. And so if you keep doing the same drills or the same strategies over and over and you're not getting out of that score band that you want to be, try new things, like come to classes. I can give you plenty of ideas. Listen to the podcast. You just got to pick somebody else's brain.
Agreed. Very similar. If you're in the boat where you are approaching test day and what you're doing is just taking a PT like every 2 or 3 days and you're not seeing any changes happen, right? It makes sense because if you just keep retaking the same exam over and over, but not making any adjustments or looking at your analytics in between, then what do you really expect to change? It's just like practicing, spending 2 hours writing over and over again. So the analytics page at that point should really be your best friend, right? Like not just taking PTs back to back, but spending the time in between and seeing, okay, where can I make an improvement? You shouldn't really be jumping from one PT to the next without having a concrete target, right? Like between this PT and the next, what I hope is that I get a little bit faster in RC, or I finish 2 more questions in LR, or I get better at weakening questions, right? I'm not just finishing one and going straight to the next. I have to have my goal for the next one.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about with making those small and reachable. Like, I feel like a lot of people get kind of overwhelmed in the first place because they're like, I'm at a 150 right now. I want to be at a 170. And it's like, okay, well, are you going to get all those 20 points by this next test? No, and don't try to. Like, that's not going to be helpful. Focus more on just increasing by 1 or 2 points overall at large. And then how do we get there? It's like just 1 more point in each section, 1 more question answered under time conditions, things like that. Baby goals, add them all up. It's going to work.
Love it. I think that's it. I don't know that there's anything left to say about anything. That's not true.
We've solved all of the world's problems. Amazing.
No. There's plenty more. And if you like what you've heard here, subscribe. Turn on the little bell on YouTube for notifications.
Ooh, the little bell. I gotta turn mine on.
Yeah. If you also, so yeah, we're gonna hear from JY in a sec here, but also, we are putting out videos of questions that Bailey and I answered of people who wrote in. Nicole did some segments with folks that we're gonna put out as standalone videos, so check those out. And also, if we did feature one of your questions, get in touch at podcast@7sage.com because we want to give you a free month of subscription for that. So, yeah. Anything else to add on this?
Keep commenting on our videos.
Yeah, keep commenting. Yeah.
If
you have other questions, then we will answer them. So, but yeah, awesome. I think, hey, we did it. If you're starting today, hopefully you feel a little bit less overwhelmed. And also, I do encourage you, show up to Nicole and Bailey have so many classes on the schedule. Most of them are just for live subscribers, so check that out. But also, if you don't have a live subscription, come to the free classes. You can still chat with them multiple times a week.
Yes,
we're always here to help you. That's why we're here. That's our job, is to help make studying for the LSAT less painful. That's our only goal. Hey,
if we have fun along the way, is that a crime? I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. All right. Thank you both for being here. Stay tuned for my chat with JY, and we look forward to talking to you all soon.
Bye.
pleased to welcome back JY to the podcast. Actually, I was wondering, are people? I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your personal studies for the LSAT, because I think it's something people are very interested in. I'm curious, like, I know that when I met you, I had the experience of thinking you were talking very slowly, because I was very used to watching the videos on 2x
live. Yes.
How often do you get that? Like, how often do you get it when people?
Never. Here's the first one.
Really? Okay. Have you ever had anyone recognize you just from your voice somewhere? Has that happened ever?
No, I don't think so. Thank God.
No. Okay.
Yeah, that would be horrifying. I mean, I guess technically that's not true. I mean, I've been to like pre-law events, and in that special kind of situation, yes, I have.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that counts.
Yeah, no, that counts. Yeah. No, it's good that it's not happening to you at, like, the post office or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. I think so what was the process of studying for the LSAT like for you? I know you said it's been a while, but I'm curious, like, what you remember of it.
Yes, back 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Pre-internet.
Yeah.
No, this was, I mean, when was this? This is 2007, so like 19 years ago. It's a long time ago. This was pre-digital test. It was paper pencil test. Logic games was still a thing. But like the LR and RC sections haven't changed that much. But what was it like? Well, I think I spent close to a year studying for it, but it wasn't like full intensity, close to it. It was like, because I was still in school. This is, between junior and senior year of college that I studied for it. So the summer between was when I was really intensely studying for it. And I didn't take a class or anything. I just bought some books. And then a lot of the theory I had to figure out myself. I just didn't think the books were in depth enough. I didn't think they were, the theory that they presented, or they were able to explain questions up to a certain level. But, I was aiming to get a 99th percentile score. So like to get those last like 10-ish points, I thought all those theories kind of just fell down, because there were shortcuts, right? There were rules of thumb. They weren't like fundamental theories. Like, the test is pretty philosophical. It gets to like formal logic. It's the logic of causation, and it's consistent. So, I had to figure out some of these theories, but I think my college training helped. I studied philosophy in college, and economics and political science, all that stuff came in handy. But anyway, so I had to figure out some of the theory myself. And then it was just the process of taking prep tests and reviewing the shit out of the prep tests. I remember, a lot of like standing over photocopiers. Just having to photocopy things that our listeners probably don't know what that is.
For listeners who don't know, that's makes physical copies of things,
like a fax machine,
Yeah. Well, now we have to explain what a fax machine is, but that's for another
time. But now online, you can just click a button and it'll duplicate a drill, right? You can just like click another button and then you'll create another drill. So it's amazing, the tools. Like, you save so much time. All that, it takes all that like manual repetitive labor out of it. So you can actually just focus on studying. I remember I carried around with me in my pocket, like I would physically cut out LR questions that I'd really struggle to understand. I would get it wrong, obviously, on the test, and then I would blind review. And by the way, that's when I started blind. I didn't call it blind review at the time. It was just a thing that I knew I had to do. Like, as soon as I finished the test, I was eager to check my score because I wanted validation, obviously.
Yes.
I want more than validation. I wanted this damn process to be over. That's like, and if I got the score that I wanted, but I knew that wasn't good for me, because the point is to learn. This prep test doesn't count for anything, right? It's a signal of what you might get on the actual test day, but it doesn't count for anything. So it's just a process to learn. So I remember at one point, I'm just like, you know what? Instead of checking my score, I'm going to like just write on top of this what I think I got. Like I would guess at the score that I got. And then I would review all the ones I weren't sure about, all the questions I wasn't sure about. And then basically go through the blind review process and then check my score. So for the ones that I missed on blind review as well, I would just cut them out. I had a stack of logical reasoning questions. I don't know how thick, but I kept them in my pocket, and just randomly I would just pull them out and review them. And on the back of them, I would write down my notes about like why I was wrong answer journaling. Again, I didn't call it wrong answer journaling, but that's essentially what it was. I wrote out my thought process. I wrote out what was wrong about my thought process. I wrote out the takeaways, the actionable takeaways, so that next time, you kind of generalize, right? The point is to generalize from this particular, you're never going to get this question again, but you will get another question that's a close analog to this question. So you want to generalize your lessons. So write that down and try to just kind of cycle through them and remember them. And that's pretty much the process of getting better. There was the concept of drilling, like that, because of how difficult it was to drill. The concept of drilling really wasn't even a thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I could imagine that it wasn't as like it'd just be a lot harder. Although I will say I did a very similar thing. Of course I used 7 Sage, so I had I had resources that you didn't when I was studying, but I had a corkboard next to my or behind my computer, and I had I physically printed out questions. I didn't have to. I chose to because I needed something tactile that I struggle with, and I in my mind I was like sort of stabbing them into the corkboard. It was like an Old West to wanted poster. I was like, these are my nemesis. I need them dead. It was like but it was helpful. It was helpful because I could look up at that before I did a PT, and it's not that I'm not going to see those questions again, but it was I would kind of think through, just see the sort of common errors that I make, where I would generalize the error. I would say, I did this wrong and I cannot do that wrong again. So things that would really haunt me. And I'm like, I need to look at that before I sit down and do another test. And that was helpful for me because I was able to really generalize the big picture errors that I was making again and again. And, eventually I stopped making them. So it's helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm remembering now all of the notes that I would leave to myself, which I think any therapist would say, oh, that's prime examples of negative self-talk. But you know what? It worked. It's stuff I just things just read, just read. Make sure
that's
you read
not
the words.
Negative self. That's
page.
Neutral self-talk. That's
true. Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's some more R-rated stuff that I wrote to myself.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, how do you think, how quickly did you start tutoring the LSAT after you took it?
Oh, I mean, in college, I my girlfriend at the time was studying for the LSAT too, and so I just naturally helped her with it. And then afterwards, after graduating, I started a little nonprofit in New York with my buddy from college. We were I was tutoring LSAT. He was running operations. I was tutoring LSAT. We put together this program to help students, predominantly immigrant students or students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, just try to get them into law school. Mostly because it's all I knew it's all I knew how to do. The only skill I had was to teach LSAT. So I did that right away, right after I graduated, and I think I worked on that nonprofit, and I went straight through to law school. And, 3 years of law school, I think I worked more on that nonprofit than I did actually attend class. I was in New York more than I was in Boston, but, it was just so much fun. I love teaching. And it was just kind of a no-brainer for me that's where I want to spend my time. And frankly, I didn't find law school classes that fun.
Yeah. You found a better use of your talents, I guess. Do you think I guess, I mean, the question I was going to ask is how did taking the LSAT inform how you taught it? But I feel like we've already kind of gotten into that. It sounds like all the techniques that are sort of core parts of 7th Age now, and I'm assuming of your tutoring then, or just stuff that you did yourself, kind of?
Well, I was the first. I mean, maybe I should go back and answer your question again. Now I realize I think I was the first student that I taught, because I had mentioned that some of the theory I didn't know what the theory was that explained. Like I would apply the theory that I had learned from these books, and they just weren't able to distinguish the right answer from the wrong answer.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out some of this theory myself to be able to get those last like 8 to whatever points.
Yeah.
But then, I think once you start, once I started, what I really liked about teaching was just like listening to the students, paying attention to them, and really getting inside their head so you understand why something is hard for them. And I didn't find that challenging. The reason is because it was so familiar to me. They're sort of misunderstandings, they're missteps off the path. It was almost like it was almost like it didn't require that much like creativity or imagination for me. It just required me tapping back into my memory because I was there. I was there not that long ago.
Yeah.
So in a way, because the test didn't come naturally to me, I had an advantage in teaching. I was just able to like relate and understand a lot better.
I think it's something you see with teachers sometimes, that like the people for whom this test comes the most naturally, which like that is a very small group of people, some of whom we work with, but like for whom where it's like they really don't, they know conditional logic, they know like, and it comes very quickly, and it's often harder for them to learn how to teach it, right? Because it's just they didn't struggle with it,
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to teach it, first you have to understand why someone can possibly misunderstand. Right? That's a prerequisite. When you were saying that, I remembered I ran this weekend session for this nonprofit, and one of the students in attendance, he was a undergrad at NYU, and I remember we're doing our segment on logic games, and I just walk around and everybody's like just kind of checking out people's diagrams and work and whatever, and this guy just sat there. All the correct answers were circled, not a scratch on his page, and he got them all right. And I'm just like, Ken, his name is Ken. Ken, how'd you do this? And he's like, oh, I just kind of see it. I just see what the pieces are and how they move and how they interact in my head. Like, are you kidding me? Like, you just see this? And so that's this is the kind of like naturally talented, like you don't that to me, I don't even understand how that's possible. Like I don't have enough buffer in my head. Like I can visualize simple things, but once pieces start moving around, I can't keep track of that. I need to be on paper.
But yeah, it is a funny thing too. Sometimes, people like are sort of like, I want to study with a 180 score or something like that. And it's like, there are plenty of 180 scores who are great teachers, but it is like a thing where it's like, it doesn't necessarily, you might not.
No, it's not,
want that.
it's not sufficient, right? It's not a sufficient condition for being a good teacher.
Absolutely.
I mean, in fact, it's not even necessary for being a good teacher.
No,
I mean, I don't think it hurts. I think getting an 180 score, certainly on balance, I'm sure it helps more than it hurts, but it's neither sufficient nor necessary to being a great teacher.
Yeah. And it can hurt. It can hurt, I would say.
It can hurt, yes.
Because you just don't have experience doing that. But it doesn't guarantee anything either way. On the whole, it's good. You understand these things, but it doesn't mean you're a good teacher.
On balance is good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. I think that, speaking for myself, like, when I was studying for the test, listening to your voice for hours on end, I had many questions about what was this? Hey, I'm here. Let me hear. So, like I had many questions about what was it like? What was it like? So I think like a glimpse behind the curtain is fun.
Can I tell you one more story?
Please.
Remember, this is my memory's not great, and this was a long time ago. But anyway, I just remembered. I was in this undergrad. I was in the library. I was on the 3rd floor of oh my god, what was the main library? Whatever the main library of my undergraduate institution. And it was my first time encountering sufficient assumption questions. And I just for the life of me couldn't figure out how they were supposed to work. It's like my whole life I had learned to do the analogy here is like it's like your whole life you learn to like do simple arithmetic, like 2 plus 3 is 5, right? 2 plus 4 is 6. Now it's like 2 plus blank is 5, right? 2 plus
Right.
blank is 5. You're supposed to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
That's what sufficient assumption questions are,
Yeah.
in relation to like must be true questions. But
Yeah.
just that little like change in frame, change in perspective, change in angle from which you're viewing the problem totally stumped me. I was holding on to I was just like, I was like, just like this, like so hard that when there was like, I literally pulled out hair. I literally pulled out hair because I was so frustrated and I couldn't figure it out. But then, like after, I don't know how long, but it took me some time. But after I figured it out, sufficient assumption questions became super easy, because they are very deterministic, they're predictable, they're formulaic, just like must be true questions, right? But there's that cliff you gotta just climb up, and once you get over that hurdle, it's
well, if you look at them like the math analogy, it's kind of perfect, right? Because like, okay, like for adults, 2 plus 3 equals 5 or 2 plus x equal 5. Hopefully it's not that hard. Like neither one of them is that hard, right? But when you're learning it, when you make the leap from arithmetic to algebra, that's massive,
That's
it's
massive.
the same thing,
That's right.
So looking backwards,
that's a really good point.
When you've like at the end of studying for the LSAT, like hopefully these things are, you can't even, it's hard to even recollect how big of a leap some of these things were. But I remember similar things. I remember just getting very frustrated with the test. I've talked about it before on the podcast, but I would just feel like things weren't fair. Like I would assume I was being cheated in some way. Just get so attached to certain wrong answers. And it's like, it's hard for me to put myself even in that mindset anymore. Cause I've spent enough time with it that I see where it's coming from,
Also because we're not like emotionally invested,
of course,
in the same way that like, I remember thinking back then, like, oh my God, my future depends on this. Like the rest of my life depends on this. And so that's just very difficult when that's your frame of mind. To be like, to accept that like, actually, no, this test is like written fairly objectively. And like the interpretations they require us to make are reasonable, and the wrong answers are defensibly wrong. And the right answer is defensively right.
Doesn't make it any less hard to go through, but it is true. And I always tell students just learn the rules. Like don't complain about the rules, just learn them. It's like if you're playing soccer and you're like, wait, why can't I use my hands? Like you just can't, it's like you're not going to change that. Some of the ways this test works, just the rules. That's
right. It's the rules. And it's voluntary, like you opt into this test. Right.
Yeah. And it's also, it is satisfying once you start to master it. I think there's something very gratifying about like just learning like this very tangible skill. And then, you'll forget all about it and go to law school, and or you won't, or you'll be where we are. But, but for the most part, you just sort of, you move past it. But it's cool.
And then in law school, you kind of realize, oh, actually the stuff that they're testing on the LSAT matter.
It's predictive.
There's a lesson in 7th stage where I specifically talk about how, I think this is in the PSA and the rule application module of the core, where I talk about how like, look, legal arguments are just a special kind of formal argument, where the rules, the laws are the laws are the conditional premises. If X, and I mean in legal jargon they're called elements, right? If element A and element B and element C trigger, then legal consequence X and Y and Z follow. So then you have facts of the case, such and such was at this location at this time, did blah blah blah, and then you're just trying to sift through the facts to see if you can trigger these elements. And if you can trigger these elements, well, then the legal consequence follows. And if you can not trigger, then the legal consequence doesn't follow. Right. So that's actually just a very simple conditional argument. And that's like, it's not all of the law, but it's a huge, I don't know, it's just a huge majority of legal arguments are like that.
Well, I think also there's a lot that you learn in studying for this test that not just like, there are elements that are, there's a reason why they do this test because it's very similar.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just not as similar as say like the MCAT is to, you know, on the and superficially it doesn't look the same,
Yeah.
but the underlying like structure of it is similar. But I also think the way that the things that you learn in studying for this test, you're going to employ later. Like when I have students who are like just struggling to figure out a study schedule or like how to do this,
Right.
I'm like, listen, figure it out now, because like it's not as stressful as this is. Like law school is going to be, it doesn't get easier, and being a lawyer,
It's a grind.
it doesn't get
It's a
easier,
grind.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
LSAT is a grind. Law school is a grind. Being a lawyer is a grind. You know, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So learn it now and it'll pay dividends in the future. Cool. Well, thanks for talking to us a little bit about your story, Jay. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex.
All right.